Welcome back to Reading Bear. Today, we will take a look at some new malicious compliance stories. And if you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comments. Let's go!
The first one is titled, Uproot the Hedge. Let's just double check. My grandmother lives in a city neighborhood where the houses are fairly close to each other. She has always had a problem with her sour neighbor complaining about one thing or another. So, one day her neighbor notifies her that she believes that the hedge running down the property line separating the two driveways is on her land and she wants my grandmother to cut it down. Seems a little stupid as the hedge provides a small amount of privacy between the two homes and benefits both parties. So, my grandmother has no choice but to comply with her wish, but first she hires a surveyor to come and determine exactly where the property line is. Turns out that the hedge is indeed on my grandmother's property. It also reveals that the neighbor's garage is 2 feet over the property line onto my grandmother's property. The look on her neighbor's face when she gets the report and is informed that she has to tear down her garage was worth the price of the survey. They eventually settled, and in the interest of peace my grandmother allowed her to buy the land on her property for several $1,000s. The next one is titled, Clean Enough, Nosy Aunt Rosie. For a bit of background, my parents are a bit older than most parents are when having a child. I was adopted at the age of 5 weeks, and at that time, my dad was 42 and my mum was 37. This is important to note, because my dad is the youngest child in his family, and his youngest sister, he was the only boy out of 4 kids, was 16 when he was born. So that being said, my aunts are all very old now, and they aren't the friendly old lady types, sadly. They've always been greedy, nosy, and loved to gossip and spread rumors about the in-laws of the family. My mum has gone through a lot of torture because of them, which is the case with this story, and now so have my husband and I. 2 of the 3 have gotten nicer over the past couple of years, but the middle sister, who is in her 80s now I believe, has always been the worst, and continues to be to this day. This story is about her. I'll call her Rosie, though I honestly don't care that much if she were to find out I wrote this. Still, I'd rather not risk that for my dad's sake, cause he'd never hear the end of it. I have many other stories about my 3 aunts, but this one came to mind recently. Aunt Rosie has lived right next door to my parents all of my life, and to convey how nosy and how much of a witch she is, I'll give a few examples of the outrageous things she's done in the past before I start the story of one of my many petty revenges against her. Rosie has, on multiple occasions, crept up to our kitchen window to peek in. Since that window is higher up due to the sink below it, she has always gone to that one, since it'd be harder for anyone to notice her peering in from below, unless they were using the sink. More times than I can count, she's scared the hell out of me while I was washing dishes. She's too old to do this now, but she would creep up and I'd usually catch her movement in my peripheral. I've broken a few dishes due to her window jump scares. Still, she topped that level of privacy invasion several times. Unbelievably, during a hurricane one year, she was so intent about seeing how badly my mum's flowers were damaged, she loves to rub that kind of thing in my mum's face just to get her upset, that she walked to our house, and stood outside in the downpour and high winds. If I hadn't noticed her and my dad hadn't gone out to make her come inside, she would have been crushed by a pecan tree. Not 5 minutes after she came in, it fell across the spot she had been standing, and onto our roof. Crazy, right? Well, instead of being shaken up by the fact that she came so close to death by tree, she was just amused, and rubbed in the fact that our sunroom roof was ducked, as well as bringing up my mum's ruined flowers. There are so many stories like that, but this should be enough to convey what kind of person she is. Anyway, on to the story. Rosie is obsessive about cleanliness as well, and our house was usually a bit messy when growing up. My dad worked long shifts, my mum had been diagnosed with MS and had battled cancer for 3 years on top of that, and though I did chores, I could only do so much more whilst going to school. Of course, Rosie would take any chance she could to come in and point out any mess, sometimes just letting herself in when she thought no one was home so she could later rub it in. She'd often insist on helping out, just so she could go gossip to my dad's other sisters about how worthless my disabled mum was, or talk about how lazy of a daughter I was. Unlike the other nieces and nephews in the family, she loves to speak poorly of me, because I was adopted, and now because I'm the black sheep of the family. I'm a Wiccan and a nerd, who doesn't conform to the preppy, snobbish behavior that the rest of my cousins have. So, one day, she came over, and actually rang the doorbell instead of just waltzing in, and I answered the back door. At the time, I was probably 13 or 14 years old. She had brought us some home-cooked food, as she did quite a bit. That seems like a sweet gesture, but in reality, she'd usually do it so that she could brag about what a good Christian she was and how she helped such a poor family. My dad has always tried to stay on good terms with her though, so I had been instructed to accept the food at the door while my mum napped and my dad was at work. It's important to note that my mum had just been diagnosed with MS a month or so before this incident. I made a bit of awkward small talk with Rosie, and then was saying goodbye, when she caught the door and stuck her head into our back porch. Just to clarify, it's a closed-in porch. I was already angry with her that day, as it had come around to us earlier in the week that she had been telling people that my dad should just leave my mum because of her decline in health. So I felt my blood boil as I watched her silently survey the entire room with a look of disgust. She didn't speak for around a minute, just stood there staring at everything. Finally, she pulled her head back and looked at me. In the most condescending and disgustingly sweet voice she could muster, she said, "Blackfire, how about you clean this porch today?" Now, I admit, the back porch was always the messiest room in the house. The far side of the room was cluttered with boxes that we didn't have proper storage space for. We would temporarily put trash bags by the door, and there was always quite a bit of dirt that constantly got tracked in from the garden several times a day. This particular day, we hadn't cleaned up the porch for about a couple of weeks, so it was worse than usual. Even still, I did not want her sticking her nose in our business and bossing me around in my own home, especially since I was helping take care of my mum too. I had a lot on my plate. It was on a Saturday, and I just wanted to relax, and cleaning would have been the farthest thing from relaxation. I was stressed out and I wanted a day to just be a kid. I tried to smile and said, "Oh, don't worry, Aunt Rosie, I'll clean this up tomorrow." It wasn't a lie, I had already planned to clean the porch the next day, but I desperately wanted some time to myself to unwind before tackling the mess. Of course, she refused to listen to me. "Oh, but wouldn't your dad feel so nice coming home tonight and seeing how clean it will be? Having to help your mama takes quite a toll on him with the amount of work he already does. It's not easy on him having a crippled wife. So it's your responsibility now to do most of the cleaning, right?" She attempted to sound solemn as she spoke like that about my mother too. Now she had pissed me off more. She knew how sensitive of a subject my mum's condition was, and she knew how badly I wished to make my dad happier with everything he had been taking on. And knowing that she had been telling everyone that my dad was suffering, having to deal with my mum, and that he should leave her, it was difficult to hold my temper and force myself to be polite. I somehow managed to calmly say, "No, it's not easy on any of us, as you so well know." With the way I said this, I made it clear to her that I knew what she'd been saying behind our backs. "You're very right. It is my responsibility. I'll clean this up today then." Her expression briefly changed at my implication that I knew of her nasty gossip, but she continued on as if I hadn't called her out. She sticks her head in again and tuts at the mess. "Oh no, this would take you several hours to properly clean on your own. How about I help later today? It'd be no trouble. This just must be cleaned up today." Now, I could barely endure a 5-minute conversation with the woman, much less a couple of hours. Again, I told her that I'd handle it myself, but it was obvious that she wasn't going to back off, as she kept going on about everything that needed to be done. So I finally agreed, though I had already decided that she wasn't going to win this. She'd only go talk shit to the rest of the family if I actually had her help, and I knew that I would definitely snap if I had to be around her and hear her passive-aggressive comments about my mum for that long. She gave me a large satisfied grin and told me she'd be back in 3 hours to help me. If she was so troubled by the mess in my house, and wanted me to make it spotless as soon as possible, I'd happily do it. Right away. Without her. After all, she said it was my responsibility after all. This is so bizarre, I know, but I knew that if she were to come back to find I had already cleaned the porch without her now, she'd be furious. She wouldn't get to rub anything in, she'd be unable to hold it over our heads, and in her eyes, she'd have lost at her own petty game. I would be getting her back in a weird way for the things she had said about my parents. She was not going to fuck with us over an untidy old porch. Before her insistence to help me, she had only said that I should tidy up. So I chose to comply with her original demand. As I typed this out, I'm realizing more and more how ridiculous this was, but she's crazy as hell, and this really is something that she would be pissed about. So, as soon as the hag started her walk back home, I jumped into action, letting my anger fuel me. My mum stopped me for a moment as I passed by her lying on the couch. She asked me what was going on, and I explained the situation to her. She was upset that Rosie was, yet again, sticking her nose where it didn't belong. My mum had been so upset by Aunt Rosie's gossip, and I knew she did not want to see her, but I asked her if she could possibly answer the door when Rosie came back. My mum hesitated, but finally nodded, saying she would like to see the look on the old bitch's face. So for the next 2 hours, I cleaned as fast as I possibly could, making sure not to leave a spot of dust or dirt. I was already worn out that day from helping my mum out so much after school each day. I was straining myself from running around so much when I finally finished, but I didn't care. I had been scared that Rosie would show up before I was done, so I was just smug that I had beaten her. Now I just had to wait. Right on time, Rosie rings the doorbell an hour later. There's a little set of windows looking out onto the porch from the kitchen, so I quickly hid by them so I could discreetly peek out at her at an angle where she wouldn't be able to see me. My mum took a deep breath to calm her nerves, grabbed her cane, and went to answer the door. I had told her what to say ahead of time if she was asked where I was. The conversation went something like this: "Mum, hello Rosie, what brings you back by today?" Rosie is silent for a long while, and I take a peek out to see her leaning forward into the porch, her mouth is agape, and she's looking the entire room over with angry wide eyes. She has a very distinct tone to her voice when she's upset, and she couldn't hide it when she finally responded. I ducked back down and just listened. "Rosie, well, Blackfire and I were supposed to clean this porch up together today." Mum, in a very innocent voice, "Oh, well, she seems to have already done it." "Rosie, I can see that." Irritated sigh, I offered my help, but I guess my help isn't wanted. "Mum, I'm sorry you feel that way. I think she wanted to just get it done quickly since it's Saturday and she has plans later." I had no such plans. "And you did tell her that she should do it today, right? It was her responsibility, right?" Rosie stutters a bit. "Well, yes. But then I told her I'd be back over to help out. She said nothing to me about having plans. I walked all the way back over here to help." "Mum, I'm sorry Rosie, but she did say she could do it on her own, didn't she?" Rosie, "Yes, but I thought y'all would appreciate my help." "I thought she would appreciate my help. Where's she at now, huh? I'd like to speak to her." "Mum, she's taking a shower right now. She was going to help me clean this up tomorrow anyway, but since you insisted she do it today, I guess she just did as you told her to. She's old enough now to do this on her own anyway, but we do all appreciate everything that you do for us, Rosie." Rosie, "Well yes, but Mum, oh. And thank you for the food earlier by the way." Rosie, "Oh. Yes, you're welcome." Mum, in an overly exhausted voice, cuts Rosie off. "I'm so sorry, but I need to go sit down because I'm crippled, as you know, but thank you for your offer. We appreciate the thoughtfulness. Have a good day, Rosie." Rosie began to say something, but then quickly realized that my mum was closing the door on her, so she muttered a strain, "You too," and the door closed in her face. My mum came back in, and we quietly stood there until we could see Rosie stomping home in a huff, and then we looked at each other and burst out laughing. I know this is a very strange malicious compliance, petty revenge, but with someone like Rosie, it really ruffled her feathers. She told my dad later that she was disappointed in me, which only made me laugh more. She didn't come back over for about a month, which was an even bigger bonus for us. It felt so good to stand up to her like that, even though it wasn't direct, and it cheered my mum up too. The next one is titled, "Just Feed the Pig Some Cheerios." We have a miniature pig. She's adorable at times, and she's insufferable at times. This pig is too smart for her own good. We use Cheerios to bribe her outdoors to go potty. She'll wrap her hooves on the back door to tell us she needs to go, but she's figured out our game. Multiple times per day she'll tell us she needs to go out, but she doesn't need to go potty, she just wants a snack. Cue tonight. It's finally 2021. I bring the animals outside so they can pee before we go to bed. Not 5 minutes later the pig starts hoofing the back door to go out again. I call her on her bullshit, open the door and shuffle step her outside, a tactic I use to educate her that when she hoofs the back door she will go outside whether she wants to or not. Wifey yells, just give her some Cheerios. Knowing pigs hate cold weather almost as much as they love Cheerios, I grab a handful of Cheerios. I then walk outside to the farthest corner of our backyard, pig in tow, and scatter the Cheerios over a relatively wide area. Now I'm back inside, snug and warm, and Piggy just now wrapped at the back door to be let back in. She's now wrapped up in a blanket, snuggled and warm, and I'm preparing to sleep past 6 AM without being woken by a pig hoofing at the back door. The next one is titled, Don't Fill It Out in Blue Ink? Sure. This is a more light-hearted example of malicious compliance, as it was literally done as a joke. So one of my teachers fills out some paperwork in light blue ink. Unfortunately, this did not photocopy well. The vice principal gave her the copy back with a sticky note saying, please do not use blue ink, this is what happens when we photocopy it. I notice a yellow pen on the desk and say, hey, use that, and she thinks it would be quite funny. So she fills it out in yellow ink, then writes a note saying, I didn't use blue ink, and a smiley face. The vice principal laughs at it. The next one is titled, You Just Want Cash for Secret Santa? Hope you like coins. Every year our family does Secret Santa between our extended family to save on costs. It's an Australian $50 limit, but we like to wrap things up all nice, and get really meaningful gifts. We use an online portal and everyone enters their preferences so you can buy something good. Unfortunately my brother-in-law didn't really take it seriously this year, not for the first time, and literally just wrote cash in his gift preferences. My wife drew him for Secret Santa, so we put our heads together to think of a creative way to maliciously comply with his request. 1. We purchased a 1-foot-tall Christmas tree. 2. We went to the bank and got $50 in assorted coins. 3. We then wrapped small bundles of 1 to 3 coins in bright wrapping paper. Then taped them so they were safe and secure. 4. We twisted paper clips, gold ones, super festive, and taped them to the bundles till they could be hung on the tree as decorations. 5. We covered the tree in wrapped coins. In all there were 38 bundles. Fast forward to opening the presents, my brother-in-law looked confused as he received a small Christmas tree wrapped in clear plastic. The card had a picture of a little money tree on it, but we still had to explain that he needed to unwrap the tree and check the decorations. He soon realized the scale of the task that was in front of him and he press-ganged the 6 children present into opening the wrapped money. We all had a laugh about it and the kids had a heap of fun opening all the little money parcels. The last one is titled, You Don't Need Help? Okay, just make sure you roll out of the way of the go-karts. This is a relatively short story from the time I worked at a go-kart track for a summer to earn some extra cash. Me and my friends all decided to work there, but didn't realize how crazy it was going to be. Every single day there was a massive issue where someone was either fired or chewed out by the owner, let's call him Greg. Now it's important to note for this story that Greg wasn't in the best shape. He was larger than life so to speak, but despite this he would be trying to help every day on the track, more likely than not causing problems that would have been easily avoided. The micromanaging was brutal, and when he wasn't physically there he would send us a lengthy email at the end of the day telling us what he did wrong after watching the cameras on the track. Now, Greg also had an attitude of, he can do no wrong, and also, he doesn't need help from nobody, which led to some awkward situations with customers, especially when they were upset. More likely than not, myself or the other employees had to apologize to customers daily when he would raise their voices at them for not wearing their helmet correctly, and if we ever mentioned it he would then turn on us and begin to chew us out for doubting his actions. So, one of our responsibilities is standing around the track with a stop sign with the word slow on it to wave at drivers who are going too fast and driving recklessly. The vehicles were too loud to simply yell at them. The track was pretty bendy, but part of it zoomed right by Greg's office, where he always kept a sign handy in case he thought a driver needed to slow way down. It was one of those days and a driver was zooming and bumping against other drivers and the walls, so Greg thunders out of the office, grabs his sign and waved it in front of the driver in question, who proceeds to whiz right past him. He goes around again. Greg more aggressively shakes the sign at the driver, who once again ignored him and kept going. This did not please Greg. Finally, Greg uses all his might and really shakes the sign in front of the driver's face, but unfortunately loses his balance and falls onto the track. We rush over to him and ask if he needs help, which he replies with, in his usual angry bellow, "I'm fine. Leave me." Now normally, for any other person, we could have stopped the traffic and given him a hand regardless. But this was Greg, and he was very clear that he was fine and we should leave him. But despite that, he was still on the ground, rolling around and unsuccessfully getting upright from his prone position. I suddenly get an amazing idea. I grab some spare orange traffic cones, and put them around him on the track to make sure that the carts didn't get too close. It was all I really could do while following his instructions. Only until about 10 minutes later, when all the go-karts had pulled off the track, was when Greg managed to get himself upright, but by then we had already all busted a gut laughing. I'll truly never forget seeing him squirming mere inches from carts while refusing help. It was a sight to see. Thanks for listening.